I'm tier listing the Lost Ark classes, so you don't have to. So, disclaimer, this is only based off, number one, the tutorials. So when you choose your class, there's an option to test them. So for an example, my favorite is the Shadowhunter, I think. I get them confused because they sound the same. But these are the assassin classes, and Reaper is not one you can choose to start with. There's apparently evolutions, which I didn't even know about. But there's evolution, so Reaper, Scouter, Sorceress, Arcana, Lance Master, and I think Destroyer. Those should be ones that I'm not tier listing because I have no knowledge of them. They're I guess late game something. They're like an evolution or something, and it's not in the tutorials. This is purely based off the tests when you are choosing your class. There's a few things I'm going to be basing it off of. How well it damages, so if it's low damage but fast, or slow but high damage, they're really going to cancel each other out. It's just, also it's based off how fun they are to play, so like, characters like the Hawkeye and other of these gunslinger classes are they're not as fun because you have to be more accurate, whereas Sorceress, you literally just make everything explode in front of you, and then like Berserker and all these other tanky ones just kind of swing a giant sword. So there's also, what are some other things? I'm also basing it off their abilities, so like the top row, bottom row, and kind of their ultimate ability, I guess. Not that one ultimate ability will be better than the other, and that makes a different character worse. It's really just how useful is it? I guess that was completely a pointless sentence. But I'm not gonna make my Shadowhunter's demonic form ultimate ability outweigh, I don't know, someone else's, just because they're so different. It's hard to actually say one's better, but some can be more useful in a way. So like Paladin, the Paladin can heal. So obviously that's going to be more useful than someone who just kind of does nothing. Whereas like, well, and it also depends. Like a Paladin's not going to be solely solo damage, whereas a Shadowhunter could be. So there's a lot of factors factoring in, but it's really just how fun they are, while also, you know, giving the like points as to why they're useful. Okay, so I went through all the classes in game. Actually, didn't even think about recording the footage for some reason, but I should in post put images and stuff. So we're gonna start with the Berserker class, which is it's definitely S tier. I know that for sure. It's really popular. I'm pretty sure Asmongold chose it. A bunch of the streamers I was watching chose it. A lot of people even chose just the tank class in general. Like I've seen people with Gunlancer. Personally, I liked Shadowhunter and Sorceress a little bit more, but it was definitely good. But it's just not something I want to play with yet. And I preferred the Paladin over it, which I'll get to in about like 2 things. So the Berserker is slow at damaging, obviously, because he carries a giant sword, but it's super high damage. And he's a tank, so that's also something to take into account. He's going to have high health and be in the front lines taking damage. I'm not going to be doing a lot of like mass raiding or whatever it is, like a lot of people did in World of Warcraft. I'm just kind of playing solo for fun. But obviously it's a tank. It's not that hard to see that this whatever this class is called, I forgot, is a tank class. The ultimate ability is pretty good too. It was really fun to use. The top abilities are really just, they're good, but they're simple. They're just kind of attacking, not anything crazy. Just, you know, you can probably chain it or do something, combo it. And the bottom basically, the Berserker has all-around good abilities for damage, and just it fits the character well. Nothing too crazy. Obviously, it's good for frontlining and mobbing, so you can hit multiple enemies while also doing a lot of damage to a boss. And another thing I wanted to factor in for all classes is the dodge. The Berserker had a decent dodge where you actually get a good distance away. I think there's only like 1 or 2 classes where the dodge is just very minuscule and almost useless. But yeah, I gave it like a 9 out of 10 overall because it's just the attack can be a little too slow, and that's just why it's not perfect. But obviously the damage is making up for that, but I'd prefer a little bit faster of attack in a fun way. Okay, next is the Gunlancer, which I don't know why it says Warlord. I guess that's... I don't even know. Gunlancer, I also put... Oh, wait, no, I didn't. I put it in A tier. The basic attack is slow, and it's not like the Berserker. You're not swinging around a sword. You're carrying, like, a gun shield thing. So you're just kind of, like, stabbing with it, almost, in a lot of scenarios. So yeah, the basic attack is really slow. Its ranged AoE isn't bad because it shoots, but it has less regular AoE than the Berserker. So when it's just doing the basic attacks, it's not getting enough AoE as a frontline tank could with mobbing. The top row of abilities are really good for just kind of attacking groups of mobs at any distance, really, but then the bottom row of abilities actually makes up for the lack of close range AoE. And then the final point I want to make about the Gunlancer is it should not be a solo DPS just because it's a little too slow. I mean, and to be fair, you should probably go through and test them all yourself and see which ones are enjoyable. Do your own research, but this is just my opinions as someone who just started playing the game and had their first hand experience. But I also am not someone that played World of Warcraft. I did not enjoy World of Warcraft in the slightest, so I have no knowledge of like any of that past experience that a lot of World of Warcraft players would have, like Asmongold and other people who came over to Lost Ark. So maybe the Gunlancer is good, but in my opinion, it's just way too slow, concentrated attacks to be a good frontline DPS. Otherwise, it's still like a 7 out of 10. But it's just not as overall good as a lot of other classes can be. The Paladin. Paladin is probably, in my opinion, the best class. Now, it may not be the best class, but from what I understand of using its abilities, is that the Paladin is probably the best overall, just most well-rounded character. Definitely not my favorite, but I think after I finish my Shadowhunter and my Sorceress, I'll probably do a Paladin. I also like the Soulfist, but the Paladin seemed really fun when I was testing it out. And it is by far the top of S tier. I probably should have saved it for last, but I think it's the best. It's 10 out of 10, S tier, the best class. So number 1, it's got good dodge. I don't know why I put that first in my notes. But it's got a good dodge, obviously. Same with the Gunlancer. They all have good dodges so far. The basic attacks are good. It's another sword swinger, so he's hitting multiple enemies at a time in front of him and around him. And he also has, when you combo it, I'm pretty sure he shoots like a beam of holy light out of his hand. So then that's even a little bit more. And it's got a big AoE range, both around and in front. The top row of abilities also have really good AoE, as well as being easily comboed together or just with the basic attack. Bottom row, also good AoE, but it's a little bit more concentrated, and I think you can aim it a little bit better other than just getting around you. The ult is also really good because it's you got one choice of doing damage and one choice of healing your surroundings around you. So that's kind of why I put it as an S tier, because if you're a tank and you're also healing, like let's say other DPSs, like let's say your scrappers or whatever they're called. Yeah, scrappers, your Soulfist, strikers, Shadowhunters, Deathblades. Anyone doing up close damage with you and you're healing them with your ult, that's just crazy, especially for the frontline tank. And it's just all around good against whatever. It's a good against bosses, good against mobs. It's a good support while also being a fast DPS compared to the Gunlancer, which kind of attacks slower and more concentrated. So, yeah, Paladin is my top class, even though I didn't choose it. It's probably really fun, but I just felt I'm not going to be doing a lot of, you know, joint PvP and PvE, so it doesn't really matter if I build one now or not. Obviously, take this all with a grain of salt, do your own tests, but this is just some basic knowledge of someone who's an outsider of the MMO scene. Maybe you're thinking, why should I be listening to this guy? But to be fair, this is all based off my first experience trying these classes, so... And to be fair, there are abilities that aren't in the testing showcase thing. I don't know why, but they give you like a basic built character. I don't think the gear is anything crazy, but yeah. So it's really just based off kind of a good understanding of the character. Okay, and next we went from 100 and now we're going all the way down to 0 with the Bard, which is, in my opinion, the worst class. Now, that is probably very controversial, but number one, it's just not fun. I want to get that out of the way. It could be tactically useful, but it was just completely unenjoyable to play. It's got bad basic attacks. You just strum the instrument, and it does like these really weak, just kind of simple attacks that are really slow and just not great in any way. It's got really low damage, but good AoE with its top abilities, but it's just not what you'd want. The dodge is good, but it's just, it doesn't have too much damage. It's just got AoE because it's a sorceress or mage or whatever the parent class is called. But it does seem supportive. Like, there are supportive abilities, but obviously I was playing solo in the trial, so I couldn't really tell, but it's just, it's not good outside of anything other than a support. Like, there's no DPS option, really. Unlike the Paladin, which you could heal with your ultimate, which obviously would take a long time, but at the same time, you're still being a useful damage, where the Bard, if they're not healing, they're kind of useless. So yeah, that one was really quick because it's just low damage, but a support, basically. So, and I gave it a 6 out of 10 because the 5 out of 10 for being a support, and then the little extra point to give it a 6 out of 10 just because it's not, like, it's got some potential. I'm just not seeing it while trying it out. Sorcerer, or Sorceress, I guess. This one's 9 out of 10 as well. S tier. I think it's probably, it doesn't really matter. It's the same as the Berserker. So this was actually the class I was going to choose and play with, but when I actually tried them all out, I realized Shadowhunter is a little bit more fun for my playstyle. Also, this is coming from the opinion of someone who plays Genshin as an Unga bunga person, so I'll probably put that in the title too. And from playing Genshin, I like to just, you know, do a lot of damage, make everything explode in front of me, and just make everything flashy and cool. And I don't really like tanks. I like the magic-y type people, and so I was originally going to choose the Sorcerer, but I'll get to why I didn't like it later. So it's got good AoE overall, basic attacks, abilities, everything's good AoE, crazy cool, fun, everything looks enjoyable. Its build is really simple because the stuff you want to invest in is just the better abilities, really. Stuff like explosion and some ice, really good ice abilities. It's got slow charge up times, which is something that when I was looking into a build you had to take into account, but I think you can actually invest into lower abilities or lower charge up times, but you just got to be careful. And obviously you're not a frontline DPS, you're ranged, so you have some room to work with, especially in like boss fights and co-op battles. So that makes up for the fact that playing solo, it's a little more risky because you're the one being focused. The dodge is actually really good though, which thank God, because this is a very vulnerable character. Now, when I was playing, I died a few times because I would charge up an attack while low, thinking I'm just going to explode them all, and it took a little too much time, and I died. And so that's just something to take into account is when playing this class, you have to be aware of your surroundings and know if you have time to charge up. It's kind of like playing, let's say, Apex or Fortnite and knowing how much time you have to heal. You just have to make sure that you are in a safe range to where you have that time to charge up. And obviously you can tank a few hits for like a second or two, but you don't want to try and use explosion in a group of enemies that are doing a bunch of damage because you're going to charge up for like 5 seconds. So that's the only problem with this class, is you have a little bit too slow of a charge up time that you can be vulnerable in a little too many scenarios, and you just have to watch for that when attacking. Okay, so next, also, I'm just going to make D tier. I haven't tried because it's not choosable. Not starting. So then we'll just get Destroyer, Arcana, and Summoner out of the way, because I really had no clue those even existed. I didn't even see anyone with those in their titles on Twitch, so I have no clue. What was next? Aha, Wardancer. So the martial artist is a really interesting class I did not expect. It's kind of cool, actually. But to be fair, a lot of the classes, except for Soulfist, were just not fun, in my opinion. They were very mediocre, to say the least. Definitely better than Bard, though, but just not... I don't know, Soulfist was just a lot more fun, and honestly just better, in my opinion. So Wardancer right here, and I gave it a A tier 8.5 out of 10 rating because its basic attacks are fast but weak, but still has AoE. So obviously it's one of those cases where you attack fast but you do low damage rather than, you know, doing high damage and slow. So that doesn't really make a difference, and it has AoE, so it's not the worst. Top abilities are good, and they have AoE, probably good for comboing. Bottom abilities, also really good, and they kind of make up for the low damage by being higher damage abilities. The dodge is kind of short, though. That's probably where the 0.5 came off of. The dodge is a little short, and when you're doing low damage close, you kind of need to get out fast. So having a short dodge is a little dangerous. I don't think it was one of the bad dodges. I think it's just shorter than the others, which I wasn't expecting. And the reason why I gave it A tier is just because it's not the highest DPS. So as opposed to like Sorceress, Shadowhunter, Deathblade, Soulfist, it's just not doing the same amount of damage that you could with those. And obviously it could be affected by the weapons and the gear and whatever else, but this was purely in the trial, so what you're getting your first taste of. So if that's how late game Wardancer is going to feel, then that's something to take into account. But personally, it wasn't bad. It wasn't unenjoyable. It was a decent class that just... You could just have more DPS. Like, there are other classes that just did more damage, so this was just not one I felt should be higher than those or as high. Okay, next up is Scrapper. Scrapper, I actually gave a 7 out of 10. I didn't give it a tier. I'm just going to put it, it's going to be the bottom of A. Scrapper. It's actually got, it's a little bit slower but higher DPS than the Wardancer and other martial artists. But its top row abilities are just mid. Like, they're just nothing great. They're just kind of more attacks, basically, that don't make up for anything. The bottom row is actually high DPS, but you have a meter of whether you can use them or not. Oh yeah, and the Sorceress also has a like magic mana. It's like a mana bar or something, so you can't just spam abilities, even though you have your cooldown back. And that's the same with the Scrapper. The dodge is also short, so that's another thing to take into account when you're a close range, punchy person. But it's actually got some good AoE, but it felt very ability dependent, and the abilities weren't even that great. And it's just not... Like, it's not the best AoE and it's not the best damage, so that's also why it's low again. And just playing as a Sorceress or playing as any of the tank classes, it's just like, you don't really got a lot of room to work with the Scrapper. It's just kind of... It's just kind of mid. It's really, really just mid. But I don't want to put it on the same tier as Bard because... Actually, you know what? I'll move Bard down and Scrapper will just be B tier because the Scrapper is just so mid. Like, it's not the worst class, but it's got nothing to actually rival other classes as something because it's very similar. Because it's a martial artist class, it's very similar to the other ones, and the other ones are just better. And now we're on to the Soulfist, which is my favorite martial artist. But it's not getting an S tier, and there is a very good reason why. But it's getting an 8.5 out of 10, A tier, and the same as Wardancer. It's got really good AoE that I really loved. It's, in my opinion, it's very similar to the Shadowhunter, and I almost chose it over it. But the problem is it's got a lot lower damage. I'm pretty sure it was the lowest martial artist damage, even to the point where in the trial I was getting single-digit damage numbers, which when you're attacking fast can kind of be, like, negated. But at the same time, when you're just not doing a lot of damage overall compared to other classes, it's a little frustrating. But that lacking damage is what brought it down, but it's still good in, like, at the abilities. So, like, the top row just has good damage to make up for it. And the bottom row's got an even better AoE. So it's also very ability dependent, but it's still got good AoE with its basic attack. But with the lack of damage, you get 0.5 taken off because you're... Like, compared to the Wardancer, the Soulfist has better AoE, but the Wardancer is doing more damage. So it kind of cancels each other out as, like, I'm kind of just stuck using abilities. But that's fine because the abilities kind of had a low cooldown too. But you also have the energy depletion again that takes forever if it depletes. Depletes fully. The ultimate actually also makes everything better. Like, it was just so much fun. Very crazy difference in the character. And the dodge is better than the other martial artists, actually. And then I don't have a lot for the striker, which is the male martial artist. I'm pretty sure, yeah. But I just wrote down same as Scrapper, so I'm assuming when I tried it, it felt like it was very, very, very similar attacks, and so that's where it will go. But it's these martial artists are the female class, which it's a little frustrating that you have to pick a gender to get certain classes because I almost missed out on Soulfist because I didn't know that you had to pick different classes. So that it's not frustrating the fact that you're forced into a specific gender because you don't really get to see your character that much. It's so tiny unless you zoom in, but then you can't play. But the problem is that you just don't know. Like, it doesn't tell you with the gunners or whatever they're called and the martial artists that there's different classes for different genders. It's just a little confusing because it takes a lot to then go in and change the character because you have to customize the character and then choose their class by actually playing. So it's a little frustrating of a character building thing, but it's not the worst because it's doable and you can just delete characters, which is what I did when I was trying them out. So then we're on to the Gunslinger, I guess. I don't even know what they're called. Sharpshooters. I was really underwhelmed by this class. I thought it would be on par with the Sorceress in like terms of how fun it is, but it's just not the best. Although the Sharpshooter is a 9.5 out of 10 S tier, which I think puts it above. I'm going to put it below Berserker, but I definitely rated it a little bit higher. So it's got good damage, and it's not the best AoE, but it's still, I think it was still decent. The top abilities have a good long range AoE, so like hitting multiple enemies, and I think some like do more damage once they actually land further away. But then the bottom row is this is what actually rated it really high. The top row is good for ranged AoE, but then the bottom row you can use to like protect yourself. And obviously the Sharpshooter is a bow user. So when you're having to aim to actually attack around you, you don't just kind of spam click and hit everything. You actually have to aim a little bit more, which is why it's not a perfect 10 out of 10. But because you're aiming so much, you have that bottom row to actually make up for the stuff around you. And I think there's even a swirl attack to do a full circle of damage around you, but I could be wrong. The ult increases damage and AoE, so the ult is literally just buffing what was already good about it. The dodge is good, but the only downside, like I said, was it's very, very aim dependent. You have to not be perfect with your aim because there's AoE on the arrow, but you just have to aim a little bit more because you're shooting a singular arrow. It's not like the other gunslingers where you're shooting bullets, and it's not like the Sorceress where it's just explosions of damage. So you just have to take into account the fact you have to aim, which to some people could not be a downside at all. So that's why it's also rated so high. The Deadeye. Deadeye. Devil Hunter, how dare you? You're getting F tier for that. How dare you hunt my favorite class? The Deadeye, I did 8 out of 10 A tier. High A, but really not going to compete with the other ones in my opinion. So the Deadeye, and I think the Gunslinger that it says here they're the same one. So the Deadeye is just the male version, where the Gunslinger is basically the female version with just all of them combined, really. So the Deadeye, you can swap between dual pistols, a shotgun, and a sniper. And so I'll go through all of those. The dual pistols are good damage, good AoE. They're the weapons that I would use, and that goes for the Gunslinger. I'll elaborate a little bit more on her because she's different. The shotgun is actually really slow. Obviously, it's going to be good DPS and AoE because it's a shotgun, but it's slow and very close range. I wasn't too impressed by it, but it wasn't the worst thing. But personally, I just wouldn't use the shotgun. The sniper, on the other hand, is actually kind of useful because it's got better range, obviously. But it's slow, high direct damage. So obviously use it for bosses and other stuff. But personally, I would only just use the dual pistols. But it also has a good dodge, so that's not bad. But I gave it an 8 out of 10 because the fact that you have to swap between weapons, and to me, they just weren't that good. Like, they weren't equally as good. So it wasn't like the dual pistols were good for mobbing, while the shotguns was good for close range, and the sniper was good for long range, and they were all equally good in their own way. It really felt like the shotgun was kind of lacking, and there wasn't a reason to use it when you could just use the pistols. And the sniper was really hard to use close range because it's a very concentrated long attack. So it's not the best, but obviously people are going to have different opinions. So yeah, and so we'll just skip the artillerist real quick and do the gunner female. So the female, I don't think has any choices, if I remember correctly. But unlike the Deadeye, you don't swap between weapons. You hold the dual pistols and have abilities for the shotgun and sniper. So in my opinion, it's actually a tiny bit better than the Deadeye because you don't have to rely on swapping weapons. You get to just use your abilities when you need to. Yeah, it's just a little bit better. So if you want to run Deadeye, I'd honestly say go Gunslinger. It's a little bit better. And then the last of the gunner class or whatever it is, the artillerist, which I put at A tier, 8 out of 10. So basically the same thing. I'm going to put it above Deadeye though. So it's got good damage and AoE because it's obviously an artillerist. It's got the most heavy tactical weaponry. But it's got a really slow turn when you're holding down the attacks. I'm pretty sure you just kind of hold your gun and you just shoot, but you turn really slow and it's not consistent because you're firing a single shot one after another instead of a stream of bullets. So when you're turning, you're like skipping these big areas where you could be hitting your attacks. So that's just one thing to take into account. Abilities are also high DPS but slow. Basically all around they're high DPS but slow. The ult is just a big gun. I'm pretty sure it's an AA gun or anti-aircraft gun. At least that's what it looks like. Or it's just an artillery gun. It's just a big ground gun. Which, funny enough, it's basically the same as the basic attack. Just a tiny bit faster of a turn and then however much more damage. But it was literally just the basic attack, just stationary and a little bit faster turn. Overall, the artillerist isn't the worst, especially in the gunner class, because you basically just trade the speed for the damage. So you're doing a lot of damage, but just very slow at everything else, which isn't the worst. It's just very dependent on your playstyle of, do you want to do fast DPS or do you want to just take some time to hit some tanky shots? Okay, and now on to my favorite overall class, which ironically it's the last one. We have the assassins. That's what they are. I'm trying to think they're like demonic or something. Deathblade. So the Deathblade, I'm pretty sure the Deathblade, like lore-wise, is supposed to hunt demons, and the Shadowhunter is a demon. I think that's why I kept getting them confused, is because it's like Demon Hunter and Shadowhunter, basically, is what their names would seem like. And so the Shadowhunter's a demon, and the Demon Hunter's a shadow. I don't know. There was something that kept confusing me. But the Deathblade has got a good basic attack. I'm pretty sure both assassins, I know the Shadowhunter does. I can't remember what the Deathblade's weapons look like, if they were different, but I think they carry two big upside down sword dagger looking things. Just oversized daggers, not actually swords. And so they do a lot of flashy, close range AoE attacks, hitting multiple targets, doing a lot of damage. Not the best damage compared to like Paladins and Sorcerers, but for their speed, it's actually good damage compared to the martial artists. The abilities are all good, but take a little bit too long to charge up, I think. There's something about them I have in my notes. Abilities are good, but long. Oh, that's what it was. Now I remember. The abilities are good. They're good damage and good AoE, but they go on for a little too long. So you can be stuck in that animation, and I don't think this game really has anything to cancel that, besides maybe the dodge, which does have a good dodge. So you just got to take into account that the attacks can go on for a little bit longer than most other characters, or at least it felt like it. And then the ult is just a basic damage and AoE increase. Like a good amount of increase, but it's just simply a damage and AoE boost. So yeah, I gave it a 9.5 out of 10, S tier. And the only downside I really put was that its attacks are just a little too long. Like it might just mess you up a little bit, and in my opinion, you could be like spamming other abilities and you're just not doing as many attacks as you could be. So that's why I put the Deathblade as a 9.5. Reaper is obviously the evolution. And the final class, my favorite class, my class I'm doing and building now, the Shadowhunter. So the Shadowhunter is like your classic anime main character that has secret demonic powers, your Naruto that can turn into a demon. I actually didn't really know about that until I actually played the class, so thank God that's the one I chose, because it's the one I did the least amount of testing on. Well, at the time, I did the least amount of testing on until I actually played through, but I've played, I think I'm level 27 or 28. So, not the most experienced, but I got the feel for the Shadowhunter after the tutorial. Which I love all of the abilities. They're so good. And if you do the build on lost-ark.maxroll.gg. Not sponsored, but it's an amazing website. Gives you all your builds. So this is the build I'm going for on my Shadowhunter. And so it goes by like different, like weird increments. So it's like 12, 16, 19, 21. Doesn't go level by level, because I'm assuming, I don't know, the skill point things are weird. It's not just one per level, but so like by the time you go from level 21 to level 25, this is what you should be invested in on level 25. Obviously, you're gonna have leftover points and stuff, but I think it just goes in the amount of points you'll have to get these. I don't even know what they're called. Whatever these like add-ons are for your abilities. So but those the abilities it has you invest in on that build are really fun. But the Shadowhunter, it's got good close and mid-range DPS and AoE, so you can do damage around you with your basic attack and other attacks, but then you also have attacks like one of my favorites is a giant hand that just pops up and just plows through enemies, grabs them and pulls them close. There's also like a ray beam that you shoot out that does a insane amount of damage. I think by far one of my favorite abilities is you have like this demon pop out from behind you, and it just does like 2 or 3 slashes of its hands and basically just nukes everything in front of you. But then it still has like a few long range abilities. The basic attacks are low DPS but fast, so obviously what you'd expect from a fast attacker. Abilities are all high damage, fast, AoE, much faster and better than the Deathblade, but it just depends on which one you like more, because the ability length isn't, it's not the worst, but it could be the deciding factor for some people like me. Dodge is also good. So it wasn't really anyone with bad dodges. Some are just shorter than the others. And then the alt. Whew, the alt's kind of crazy. So the alt, you turn into like a demon. And I was a little worried because the first time I used the ability in like the real game, I would lose health every time I attacked. I'm like, is your health bar now turned into the energy bar for your attacks? But it was just because I was fighting strong enemies. But the alt, you turn into a demon, and you have only 4 abilities, or at least I think that's all you have. I don't know. Maybe you can add more. But that's all I have. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. The alt literally increases your movement speed, your attack speed, your damage, your AoE, your abilities. Everything gets a major increase. The only problem is it actually takes a really long time to then build up again, and it's because of that. There are cases where I haven't used it because I didn't know if that's the major boss fight. Sometimes I've wasted it, so it takes a long time to build up, but it's really worth it. And so my favorite class, the final class we are tier listing, is going to be a 9.5 S tier. Not the best. Paladin, in my opinion, is the best overall, but the Shadowhunter is really good. And just in some cases, you might not be doing too much damage. Like, you could be a little lacking in damage. The abilities make up for it, but the basic attacks can kind of be a little lackluster. But you get a lot of abilities back decently fast. So, yeah, if you just cycle through them all, you should have a lot of them back again. Yeah, so this is my Lost Ark class tier list based off of their tutorials and trials. So, yeah. Obviously, try them for yourself. Take some of these opinions with a grain of salt. If you think a class is fun, by all means try it. You've got 6 characters per server, so literally just join like 3 different servers and have one of each different class and subclass thing. It's really important to try it because that's how I found out things like the Soulfist and the Shadowhunter were much better than the Sorceress, because I didn't have to worry about charging up attacks and I could just spam. But then I also found out that the Paladin was much better than Berserker, even though Berserker is probably the most popular class. So yeah, just look up videos, look up streamers, do the tutorials if you want. But by all means, trust me, this is purely based off the tutorials and a little bit of how fun they are. All the classes can be fun depending on how you play it, but these S tier classes are obviously more fun because they do a little bit more damage. Soulfist and stuff is kind of a little bit more flashy, but just like these are good classes that can be enjoyable to play, but they're just lacking in one thing or another. Most of the time it's a little bit of damage, so, or playstyle for gunslingers. So yeah, that's the tier list. Comment if you have opinions so I and others can know. Like, subscribe. I think that's everything. Thanks for watching. Peace.